Welcome back. One final point before we go tonight. What the mainstream media was too afraid to tell you about the news this week. This week, while the mainstream media obsessed about a porn star on cable news, here are the things that happened that really matter. The U.S. Department of Commerce announced that the 2020 census will feature a question asking whether respondents are citizens of the United States or not. In response to this announcement, liberals went wild. Former Attorney General Eric Holder threatened to sue the Trump administration. Nancy Pelosi said it was unconstitutional. And the liberal pundit class deployed a talking point claiming that this question about citizenship hasn't appeared on a U.S. census since the 1950s, when it was used as a mask for racial discrimination. That is false. In fact, up until 2010, when President Obama removed the question from the census, the question about citizenship appeared in the long-form version of the census, which is served to 1 out of every 6 households. But did the mainstream media tell you that? Oh no, they didn't. They didn't even correct the fact and say, actually, the citizenship question was on the census through the year 2000. The new omnibus spending bill includes a provision to empower the CDC to fund studies on gun violence. Liberals claim the NRA stopped this funding years ago because liberals claim the NRA doesn't care about gun violence. But this is false. In fact, the NRA did blow the whistle on inappropriate political activism by the CDC after high-ranking CDC officials said that they were going to systematically build a case that owning firearms causes death by waging campaigns against guns the way they did against cigarettes in order to convince Americans that guns are a public health menace. See the problem here? This is not studying firearm safety. This is waging a political campaign with a preconceived political agenda. But did the mainstream media call out the left when they claimed the NRA cut the CDC budget to study gun violence because the NRA doesn't care about kids? Oh no. The mainstream media actually propagated this false narrative because at the end of the day, the mainstream media is controlled by the left. The FBI revealed this week that the father of the Pulse nightclub shooter Omar Mateen was an FBI informant. The FBI testified during the trial of Mateen's wife that one of the reasons the FBI didn't charge Mateen with threats he made before the attack was because his father begged his handlers at the FBI not to target his son. This after the FBI knew Mateen's father was funding terror in the Middle East. It begs the question, if the FBI had done their job, would that have prevented the Pulse nightclub attack? And is this just another example of political bureaucracy getting in the way of law enforcement? Well, we'll never know because the mainstream media refuses to ask unbiased and astute questions. Former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens penned an op-ed in the New York Times this week calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment. Meanwhile, the March for Our Lives claims that they don't want to ban guns, even though on their website it says they want only police and military to be allowed to possess certain weapons that are right now in the common use in our country. Not to mention what happens in nations that disarm their citizens, like Nazi Germany, or Stalin's Soviet Union, or Mao's Red China. What happens is tyrants are able to mass murder their people. But the left claims they aren't trying to ban guns, as they are literally calling for bans on guns. Funny how the mainstream media didn't care to report on this hypocrisy and doublespeak. In fact, the mainstream media doesn't care to report any of this to you. So we will. And that is my final point. You can reach me on Twitter at Liz_Wheeler. If you liked the show, please send me an email at oann.com/contact. In the meantime, catch us here tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern, and until then, have a good night.